Hey there, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Carrie with bluescitypickin, and this is going to be Ching number 21 for the week of January 19th, 2025. I'm going to ask you to bear with me straight away with my voice, and unfortunately, I'm getting over the flu. We had a quite a wild bout in our house, but I am on the mend and excited to get back to filming a few things. Excuse me. So for the week of January 19th, I had a pretty good week. One of my better weeks. My profit ended up being about $519, which is amazing for me. I had 41 different orders and sold 47 items. My total sales were about $1,100 and with an average of 26. And then my average price sold was around 20, and then my average profit was $12.65. So not quite at my $15, but there were a few things in there that were really old that I was just happy to get gone at any price. So you will hear about those. I had things, my average days in inventory, or not in inventory, just on the platforms was 90. So right at about 100% sell through. I had something sell almost immediately, and then I had an item that took 316 days to sell. I think that's what I want to hit. I've got more numbers at the end as per the usual. There are timestamps down below if you want to check those out, and go ahead and skip to kind of the allocation of the stores that I shopped at and how those profits came in, as well as the genre. All right, so the first thing that sold was this vintage 60s basket. In case you don't know, the Blue City is the Memphis, Tennessee area. And so this particular basket purse type item was made for the Memphis area. It was really pretty, hand painted. The buyer paid $42. I had paid $2.92 for this at an estate sale back in October. And so my profit was $32.17 after 96 days. Next up is a Lego Duplo motorized train. This is the orange one. It does work. I sold this for $27. I paid $2 for this at a local thrift store back on January 1st. And so my profit was $20.84 after just 5 days listed. Next item is a set of Clark's Collection Wallabies. I paid $10.58 for these at Goodwill back in early January. They used my coupon that I had in my store at the time, and so they paid $29.25, and so I made $15.74 after just 3 days. Next item is an Orvis plaid wool skirt. It was a size 18 and had an elastic waist. I paid $5.99 for this at Goodwill back in November. It sold for $23.95, and so I made $18.58 after 67 days. Next item is this vintage wooden hand-painted caterpillar plaque. I got this out of an auction lot back in May. So I have about 50 cents into this. Buyer paid $7.20, and so I made $5.11 after 257 days. Next item is one of my better sales for the week. This is a Tom Clark figurine. It was Pumpkin Hattie. If you look into Tom Clark, it definitely varies on value here. So make sure that you look up the figure that you've got picked up before you definitely pay up for it or don't. Fortunately, I picked this up for just $2 at a Goodwill back in December. The buyer paid $45, and so I profited $35.13 after 27 days. Next up is this really cute vintage Chow school teacher sweater. I paid $6.07 for this at Goodwill back in October. Buyer paid $20.30, and so I made $10.99 after 93 days. Next up is this vintage Victorian porcelain couple. This was out of an auction lot back in May. I have $1 into it. Buyer paid $8.50, and so I made $4.35 after 251 days. Would not pick that up again. Way too long of a tail. And I didn't pick up that lot deliberately for that item. There were several other items that I've made more money on out of it, but since I was already listing, I went ahead and did it. And so I made some money off of it, so no harm, no foul. Next up is a Jabot red logo striped polo. I paid $7.40 for this at a Goodwill back at the very end of October. Buyer paid $27.12, so I made $15.54 after 76 days. Next up is this Exo Squad set of missiles. This came out of that Whatnot accessory weapon lot from back in November. So I have $1 into this. Buyer paid $15. I made $11.02 after 62 days. Another Jabot shirt. This one I believe was new with tags. It's an extra large. So buyer paid $29.90 for it. I was $7.40 in at a good that I got at the same time as the other one at a local Goodwill. So I made $16.79 after 72 days. Next up on things I would not pick up again. This was a Tory Burch hobo shoulder bag. When I originally did the comping on this, it was saying anywhere from $50 to $60. So I went ahead and paid up for it at $20.24 from Goodwill back in October. Buyer ended up paying $39.20. I made $11.62, but I was just excited to go ahead and recoup my money and invest it into some faster moving inventory. Next item is a old trackball mouse for PCs. These can sell well. This particular one, I have $1 into it from a Whatnot lot. It sold for $9.60, and so I made $4.68 after 40 days. Don't necessarily recommend this particular brand or mouse, but because it was in the Atari lot that I bought, I just went ahead and listed it to recoup some money. Next up is a set of party light candles. I sold the majority of the candles that I bought out of this auction lot like almost immediately. I bought it back in June, so I have nothing into this particular set. It sold for $7.82. I made $6.12 after 205 days. Next item is something from a personal clean out. I had bought them for myself, but I didn't end up liking the fit. This was a pair of Old Navy Power Soft leggings. So I paid $6 for these at Goodwill. Sold them for $9.60, profit $1.75, but they sold in a day, and I was glad to get my money back out of them. Next up is a set of new old stock vintage pantyhose. I picked these up for $1 at an estate sale back in August. The buyer paid $8.95, and so I made $6.18 after 143 days. Easy lister, easy shipper, take that all day. Next up is a set of 7 salad forks from 1847 Rogers. It was the Remembrance pattern. I have $1.52 into these. I had bought a big lot of silverware at Goodwill back in October. It sold for $14.94, and so I made $11.97 after 69 days. Next up, unfortunately, this item was the longest tail item in my inventory that sold, and it's on its way back to me because they can't read measurements. This was a vintage 80s, 90s men's jacket. I accepted an offer for $15 just to get it gone. I only have $2.99 into it, so I had made $9.39. I'm going to have to pay for the return shipping, and hopefully I can sell it for around $20, so I still make a decent profit for my effort in having to ship it out multiple times. But yeah, 316 days and it's coming back. Yay. Next up is this really cute little wooden framed cross stitch, and it says bless this house. Picked this up at a yard sale for $2 back in September. It sold for $16, and so I made $10.31 after 120 days. Next up is a pair of pants that I picked up at Goodwill earlier this month. I paid $7.40 for them. They are definitely a hippie pair of pants. They were made in Nepal, so I thought those were pretty cool. They sold for $27, so I made $17.25 after just 6 days. Next item is a kids item from my ThredUp Kids Mystery Box back in October. I've been slowly pulling things out of that set of clothes, listing a few a week. This was a Zara sweatshirt. So I have $1 into it. It sold for $9.60, and I made $5.40 after just 6 days listed. Next up, this was a multi-quantity order. This gentleman bought 3 different vintage weapon accessories. He bought a Thundercats Jackman Club, a vintage Motu Mossman staff, and then a Manny Faces orange gun. I have $1 into each one of these. They sold for a total of $19.42 for all 3 pieces. And so I profited $24.66 after 65 days for all 3 of those items. Love a good multi-quantity order. Next up is a set of 2 vintage Piggly Wiggly pencils. Pulled these out of an auction lot that I bought back in June. I have nothing into them. They sold for $5, and so I made $3.95 after 213 days. Next up is a Fossil crossbody. This was a black and white tweed purse. It was very, very cute. I picked this up at Goodwill for $9.99 back in November. It sold for only $19. I thought I was going to be able to get a little bit more out of it, but I'm happy with the $5.71 profit and positive feedback after 72 days. Next up is a Russ. Its name was Polly the Bunny. It's vintage from the 80s. I had $1/4 into this from an estate sale last March. Buyer paid $6.28, and so I made $4.21 after 235 days. Next item is the Season Sampler. It was a vintage 1977 cross stitch from the brand Paragon. I paid $2 for this at an estate sale back in November. Buyer paid $25, and so I made $19.67 after 50 days. Next is, I think, the lowest profit of the week. This was a set of Keds navy blue canvas sneakers. This came out of a ThredUp mystery box that I bought at the beginning of last calendar year. I have $6.50 into each pair, and so they sold for $9, and I made 27 cents after 246 days, but it is gone. Excuse me. Next up is this small Talavera pottery hand-painted mug. I had $1 into this from an estate sale back in December. Buyer paid $9.60, and so I profited $7.79 after 25 days. Next item is another one that I would not pick up again, but I'm fine with it for now. I picked this up at that same estate sale as that mug. I have $3 into it. It sold for $8, and so I made $3.09 on this Play School wind-up seaplane. I thought I had a figure at my house that matched it. When I got it home, I did not. So then I was just trying to get my money back and then some. So happy to get my money back, and it sold in a day. So good to go. Reinvest that money somewhere else. Next up is this vintage Nickelodeon flash screen toy. It apparently was a banned toy Also from that same estate sale that the last 2 items came from. I got it home. It just looked interesting when I was at the sale, so I picked it up and I bought it in like a lot of a bunch of other little knicky-knacky toys from the vendor. So I have 50 cents into it. I got home and there was a lot of corrosion in the battery case, so I ended up selling it for just repair for 14. If it had worked, that thing's worth about 40 to 50 bucks. So it might be something for you to keep your eye on and see if you can find any in working order. So I made $10.53 on that, and it had been listed for 28 days. Next up is another weapon accessory out of that Whatnot lot. This was a Tonka GoBots Rock Lord's Crackpot Sword. Google is my friend on these. I have $1 into it. It sold for $6.99, so I made $4.58 after 52 days. Next up is this octagonal shaped tin from, I think it's Daher. It's made in England. I did pay up for this. I paid $3.40 for this at a Goodwill back in October. It only sold for $8, so I made $3.03 after 78 days. Not something I would pick up again. But I got it moved and I learned a lesson. Next up is something that you may have seen in a recent shop with me at Goodwill. This is a set of women's Vivia. I don't know how to pronounce this. I want to say Vivia. I think it's Vivia, but I'm not sure. They definitely have like a Rothy's like texture on them. This was an ankle boot. I paid $9.25 for this at Goodwill back in January. They sold for $60, and so I made $40.48 after just 11 days listed. Some more Atari parts from my Whatnot Atari buy. This was joystick controller replacement parts. The buyer bought 4 of them. They paid $28.64. I had $1.60 into the 4, and so I made $24.95 in 45 days. My fastest sale of the week that sold the same day it was listed, speaking of Rothy's, this was a Rothy's baby bucket bag. I found this at Goodwill back in the middle of January before I got sick. I paid $13.56 for it, so I did pay up for it, but I did know, and I had done some research, that the Rothy's bags actually still are holding really decent value in comparison to like the Rothy's shoes. Buyer paid $89 for this bag. So I made $60.55 in 0 days listed. So super ecstatic with that return. Next up is a pair of Vionic slip-on shoes. I paid $10.19 for these at Goodwill back at the beginning of January. They sold for $23.20, so I made $8.49 in just 8 days, so I'm happy with that quick return. Next up is a Hobo brand blue leather crossbody handbag. I did pay up for this one. I paid $13.40 for this at Goodwill back at the end of October. I was hoping to get closer to $40 so that I could get my $15 minimum, but when I got an offer for $31.20, I went ahead and took it, banked my $11.80 in profit after 79 days. One of the last few items for the week, we've got a set of Brahms salad forks. There were 4 of them. Buyer paid $4 a piece, so $16. I did have like $1.50 each into each one of these forks. I know better now that I would not pay that much per item going forward. But I still made $5.91 after 194 days, and it's easy multi-quantity listing and shipping. And then last but certainly not least, we have this vintage painted floral wooden cutting board. It was definitely cottage core. I pulled this off of a wall at an estate sale. They charged back in August. They charged me $1. Sold for $11.16, and so I made $8.15 after 164 days. If I break down where my profit came from this week, I'm sure you could probably tell that I had some really good sales from some Goodwill pickups. So out of the $518.75, $294.81 came from Goodwill. So over half of my profit came from Goodwill. I had about $70 or 13% came from Whatnot. I had about $92 from estate sales, or about 18% there. $25 from just online auction lots, so 5%, and then other of about 36. So that's local thrift stores primarily. As far as my genres this week, clothing was still kind of holding strong at 49% of my profit. I had about 30% coming from house, like including kitchen and decor. About 12% coming from collectibles, both vintage and modern, and then the last 8% came from toys. So still a pretty wide range, still an all-around seller. Not surprised to see Goodwill carrying the majority of the load, considering that's where I've done most of my sourcing lately due to timing, lack of yard sales, not a whole lot of estate sales around the holidays. So I've been really pleased with the return on investment that I've gotten on these Goodwill items lately. Super happy with the profits that I made per item, and we're just going to keep chugging along and moving forward. So I'd appreciate it if you give some of my other cha-chings a watch. You'll see that playlist pop up. Or you can check out this most recent likely sourcing video that I've posted. And without further ado, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.